now what we're going to be doing is exploring data, and we're going to be diving into a different data set to understand what kinds of insights we can get from this data. Okay. So the data set that I'm looking at is a bank marketing data set, and what we'll do is, without even knowing what it is, just open this first. It's clearly an Excel file. Let's see what it looks like when opened. You'll notice that it's not quite the same tabular structure that we are used to. Let's look at the first row. It has age, semicolon, job, semicolon, marital, semicolon, with quotes and so on. So while this is a structured file, the semicolon separates all of the columns. It is not in a format that is directly used by Excel. This is fairly common of the kind of data that you may see. There are CSV files, that is comma separated value files. There are semicolon delimited files, tab delimited files, etc. And this is a specific case of a delimited file, the delimiter being semicolon. Excel has ways of converting these into a tabular form quite easily. So we are going to explore those. Specifically, there is a function in the data tab called text to columns, which we can use to explore this. So I'm going to select the entire data. All of the data is in a single column, which is column A. So I'm going to select column A and use text to columns to walk through the options. It says I can convert either a delimited file or a fixed width file. In a delimited file, there is a delimiter, like we have semicolon here. In a fixed width file, the file has spaces used as paddings, and it looks visually like a table when you look at it as a text file. Since we have a delimited file, let's go ahead, and you can choose the delimiter here. You can choose between comma, space, or any other delimiter that you want. In our case, the delimiter is semicolon. When you do that, you find that it's automatically identified the delimited values, and you can already see them as a table. There's also what's called a text qualifier. So if you have something within double quotes, then it's treated as a string, even if there's a semicolon inside it, or a comma, or any other delimiter inside it. So another option is to treat consecutive delimiters as one. So if there are two semicolons, then should you treat those two semicolons as being a single delimiter, or should you say that there is a blank column in between? Usually, if there are two semicolons or two commas or two tabs, it indicates that there's a blank column, so you would rarely want to put this option as enabled. But there are cases where there could be errors in the data or in the formatting, in which case sometimes this does come in handy. At this point, I'm actually done, so I could say finish, but there are a few other options that we can sometimes set, and it may make sense to set. For example, we can decide what the type of each column is. Usually Excel gets the type of column right, in that if it's a number, then it's a number. If it's text, it's text. But sometimes things that are not really numbers are represented as numbers. For example, if you have an ID column, you don't really want that as a number. You want that as text. Sometimes you have date columns, and you don't want that represented as text. You want that represented as dates, and so on. So we don't have any of that, so we're going to leave it. But if, for example, there were a date column, then we would select that particular column and say this particular column is a date column. Otherwise, by default, we just say general, and it will be able to figure the information out. There is more advanced formatting that you can do. So if there are commas, if there are decimals, those can be customized as well. So some European files, the decimal separator is actually a comma, so you can choose to change that to a comma, and the thousand separator can also be modified. And now we are done with the data. When we finish it, you get a clean tabular structure for the same data.
So can you also tell me why are these comma separated or semicolon separated files very important, and how are they used normally in an office day-to-day environment?
The reason why looking at delimited files is important is because they are pretty much the lingua franca for data exchange. The idea is that we want a portable data format. An Excel file is portable for anyone else who has Excel. What if I don't have Excel? What if somebody is working with a program and needs to load the data? What if I'm working with R? What if I'm working with SAS? What if I'm working with Python? So if I want a data format that others can use, then there are a few simple considerations that people have. A, it should be easy to create. B, it should be easy to read. And C, it should be something that is tool independent. Text files are tool independent. I can open them in Notepad, I can open them in Vim, Emacs, whatever, and just read the content. So it's good to have a text file. Excel files are convenient for transporting data, not necessarily for reading. Now, if we have a tabular structure, then what kinds of mechanisms do we have for making it look tabular? Well, one way is to say that I will take a fixed width font and say 10 columns for the first column, 10 spaces for the first column, 20 spaces for the second column, etc. But that can be inefficient. You have a lot of spaces being taken up just when there's a lot of variation in the column width, especially if you have names. Some names are 3 characters long, some names are 30 characters long. So you're wasting 27 characters for the 3 character names. Instead, you put in a delimiter. Traditionally, tab has been a delimiter, but comma is also a very commonly used delimiter. Semicolon is a slightly less commonly used delimiter. Pipe is a less commonly used delimiter. These kinds of formats usually come from databases. Somebody does a database export, and you don't expect the database to know the Excel format, or if the database did, then similarly there are a dozen other formats that it might need to know. Instead, people have standardized on text-based formats. So CSV is the most commonly used text-based data exchange format, and instead of the C in the CSV, that is instead of the comma in the CSV, we sometimes use semicolons, pipes, etc.